Hello, everyone. Have you ever thought about the dangers of uncontrollable negative emotions? Today, I want to share with you a very heartbreaking story. A smart and adorable 5-year-old boy became a victim of those harmful negative thoughts. The story begins on the evening of July 8th, 2015, on a hot summer day when Mrs. Zhou picked up Ming Han from kindergarten. She saw her grandson sitting on the sofa and told him to sit there, watch TV, behave well, and wait for her to take a quick shower before they went out together. Later, Mrs. Zhou went to the bathroom, and just 1 or 2 minutes later, she heard Ming Han loudly saying that he was going out to play for a bit and would be back soon. A few minutes later, Mrs. Zhou hurried outside but couldn't find Ming Han, only his sandals and the wooden stick he often played with placed neatly against the wall outside the alley. The mischievous boy usually liked to wear his father's sandals and carry the wooden stick to play in the alley, but this time he disappeared in less than 10 minutes. Mrs. Zhou searched everywhere in the places he usually played, but he was nowhere to be found. How could a 5-year-old child disappear so quickly? Worried, Mrs. Zhou quickly called the boy's grandfather to come and help search for him. And when she learned that the boy's parents had also hurried back, the whole family searched, inside and outside the village, with some neighbors helping too. But as the sky darkened, there was still no sign of him. At this point, Ming Han's mother called the police to report her son missing. When the police arrived at the scene, they first noticed the pair of sandals and the wooden stick that Mrs. Zhou had mentioned, with the stick not only placed neatly but also balanced on the adult's sandals. This clearly did not seem like something a 5-year-old child would do. It seemed like an adult had intentionally arranged it this way. However, who that person was and what their intentions were could not be investigated because the scene had been disturbed by villagers who touched the sandals and stick many times while searching for Ming Han. Currently, they were arranged according to Mrs. Zhou's arrangement, so there were many fingerprints on these two items, making it difficult to find any useful clues. The police began investigating in the village and expanded to surrounding areas, focusing on strangers and vehicles passing through the village. At this point, a man in the village reported that in the afternoon when the incident occurred, he had seen a white minivan speeding through the village. At the end of the village, there is a cement road that connects to National Highway 107, so there are many vehicles passing by every day. The man said that in the evening when he was playing with his grandson at the intersection, the minivan came rushing from afar. Although it was about to pass through the intersection, the minivan was speeding up, so he quickly picked up his grandson and stood close to the wall. There is a small and low slope at the intersection, but the concrete road here has cracks and is relatively rough. However, the vehicle did not slow down but rushed through the concrete slope. It seemed that the driver was in a hurry because the vehicle rushed through very quickly, so this man couldn't see the license plate clearly. Later, another villager told investigators that in the evening he saw a black 4-seater car rushing out of the alley near Ming Han's house. The man recounted that when he was riding his motorcycle home, a black car rushed out of the alley and stopped right in front of him. Whether it was from a small alley or a main road, this black car drove very recklessly out of the alley without observing traffic, as if the driver was in a hurry. At that time, he was in a hurry to go home and didn't know that Ming Han had gone missing, so he didn't pay much attention and couldn't remember the license plate number of the car. So there were two vehicles, a white minivan speeding away from the scene at the intersection and heading towards National Highway 107, and a black 4-seater car very close to the scene on the evening of the incident. Both types of vehicles became top priority targets for the police search because they appeared at the scene at the time Ming Han went missing, and the reckless behavior of the drivers was very suspicious. Immediately, the police set up checkpoints on the roads leading out of the village to check all passing vehicles with characteristics similar to the two suspicious vehicles. They thoroughly checked the trunks and interiors of the vehicles, especially at checkpoints on National Highway 107 to control traffic. They even checked all types of vehicles to prevent the possibility that the kidnapper had changed vehicles after the incident. At this time, the special forces were making every effort to analyze every possibility, different scenarios, and investigate the relationships of Ming Han's family while the family was in immense pain. Mrs. Zhou always blamed herself for losing her grandson. She could never forgive herself because she was the one who picked up her grandson from kindergarten on the day of the incident. From the kindergarten's surveillance camera, it could be seen that Ming Han was holding his grandmother's hand as they walked from the second floor to the first floor. The boy was wearing a green tank top, striped white pants, and sandals. At that time, it was 5:31 p.m. After returning home, Ming Han went out to play alone in the alley, and then suddenly disappeared. Villagers speculated that Ming Han had certainly been kidnapped, and human traffickers had taken him elsewhere to sell him to desperate families. Ming Han was not only adorable and polite, but also very healthy and more intelligent than most children his age. Although he was attending kindergarten during his free time at home, he was often taught by his grandparents. Ming Han was very intelligent, so he knew how to read and write many relatively complex characters, which led villagers to believe that he had been kidnapped and sold to some desperate family. A smart and healthy child like him would surely be the dream of many parents. From police cameras, a white minivan was spotted appearing near the kindergarten gate at 5:45 p.m., at which time Ming Han had already been picked up by his grandmother. Then this van appeared again on the concrete road near the boy's house while he was playing outside the alley, and then the minivan sped towards National Highway 107. Because the footage was clear, the license plate of the van was recorded. The police quickly found information about the vehicle owner, a 45-year-old man from Henan province named Wang Shan. He said he was on his way to Xinjiang City to handle personal business. Previously, he had passed through the village a few times to take a shortcut to the city, and this time he also intended to take that shortcut but turned in the wrong direction, so he got lost. After wandering around for a while, he finally found his way back to National Highway 107, so he just happened to pass by the two spots, the kindergarten and Ming Han's house. After verifying, the police found that he was indeed telling the truth and there were no suspicious signs in his car. The white car was removed from the suspect list, although villagers thought that Ming Han had been kidnapped and taken out of the village. After a day of investigation and calculating various scenarios, the police thought otherwise. The time of the disappearance was extremely short. Based on the grandmother's testimony, Ming Han went missing from about 6:04 p.m. to 6:08 p.m. At that time, she went to take a shower, and when she came out, she couldn't find her grandson. She called Ming Han's grandfather at 6:12 p.m., and the call history was still recorded. Furthermore, a group of schoolchildren passing through the alley also saw Ming Han playing with a wooden stick in front of his house. Calculating from the time the group left school and walked home, it would be around 6:05 p.m. Ming Han was still playing in front of the house, so with such a short time it would be difficult to snatch a 5-year-old child in just 3 to 4 minutes from 6:05 p.m. to 6:08 p.m. With such a short time frame, the likelihood of kidnapping and taking a child out of the village is very low. At this point, the police continued to find footage of the black 4-seater car driving towards the end of the village through the camera. Although the time this car passed was at 5:50 p.m. when Ming Han had not yet disappeared, so the black 4-seater car was also removed from the list of suspects. Investigators all believed that in such a short moment the disappearance of Ming Han was very difficult to understand. It is highly likely that the boy is still in the village and led by someone familiar, so it didn't cause a commotion. If this speculation is correct, then Ming Han is still around here, but after more than a day of searching and searching everywhere, it seems that the condition of this 5-year-old boy has improved considerably. Of course, this is the police's analysis based on experience, not an official announcement to the family. At this point, rumors of child abduction began to spread both inside and outside the village. They spread word that a human trafficking gang had come to Xinjiang, specializing in stealing children for sale, and Ming Han was the victim kidnapped by this group. These rumors terrified people, making them afraid to let their children out alone for fear of abduction. Just the day after Ming Han went missing, a shocking incident occurred. On July 9th, in Yanqin District, about 30 kilometers from Ming Han's house, locals found the body of a child wrapped in a blanket placed on the riverbank. When the police arrived at the scene, they checked and identified this as the body of a boy estimated to be about 3 to 5 years old. When forensic doctors conducted a preliminary examination, they found a very unusual sign on the child's body, a long incision from the chest to the lower abdomen. There were no other external injuries on the child's body, but why did the child have such a long incision on the chest? After careful examination, the forensic doctors found that the cut was very straight, sharp, and professional. The stitches were also very neat, and the child's internal organs were intact. From this, the police speculated that the neat incisions on the child's body were from a surgical procedure. With this line of reasoning, the police contacted hospitals in the Xinjiang area for investigation. A day after the investigation, the police found a hospital that had operated on the boy. Doctors at the hospital confirmed that this boy was from a family from Inner Mongolia and had died from a serious illness. The doctors performed surgery with the consent of the boy's family, but due to the severity of the illness, it was incurable. Afterwards, the family took the child's body away. However, the question remains, why was the child's body left on the banks of the Yanqin River? The police immediately searched for the child's family at the address listed in the boy's medical records. When the police arrived, the boy's father said he had brought the emaciated child from Inner Mongolia here to work, but in dire straits, even his wife had left. The reason the child's body was left by the river was because of the burial customs of his ethnic group in rural Inner Mongolia. In his homeland, bodies are taken to the mountains for birds like vultures to eat. The meaning of sky burial is to discard everything related to the world of the living as quickly as possible. This sky burial custom is quite common in Inner Mongolia and Tibet, and they believe that through sky burial, the soul of the deceased will soon be reborn. Because this man didn't have enough money to hire a car to take his son's body back to Inner Mongolia, he left his son's body on the riverbank according to the custom of his homeland. At this point, the child's body on the riverbank has been clarified, but another piece of information about another missing case continued to cause panic. On July 13th, just 5 days after Ming Han went missing, 2 children from a family in Zhou Yun village nearby also suddenly disappeared. This disappearance involved 2 girls, one 7 years old and one 12 years old. And then the police went to the scene and were informed by some villagers about the incident. Some villagers said they had seen a suspicious black car appear near the area where the 2 girls often played. This car was seen parked there for a short time before disappearing with the 2 girls. People in the village said they had never seen this car in the village before. The police began to expand the scope of the investigation, focusing on searching for the black car and investigating related leads. They also called for community support to gather more information about the car and its driver. Checkpoints were set up at various points in the village and surrounding areas to tightly control incoming and outgoing vehicles. Meanwhile, the families of the 2 missing girls lived in extreme anxiety, constantly praying and hoping for the safe return of their children. The situation in the village became tense as everyone became more cautious, not daring to let their children out alone. Stories of child abduction only fueled further fear. The investigations continued, but the whereabouts of the 2 girls remained unknown. The police decided to expand the investigation to neighboring provinces, cooperating with other agencies to search for new leads. They also continued to urge the public to provide any information that could help in the search. However, as time passed without any promising signs, the families of the victims and the community continued to live in obsession and anxiety. The police continued to exert their utmost efforts, hoping to soon find important clues to resolve the case and alleviate the worries of the people. On the afternoon of July 13th, villagers saw 2 children running on the dirt road to the southeast of the village. The police investigated in this direction and discovered about 1 kilometer southeast of the girls' house there was a canal used for irrigation. The water surface was about 3 meters wide, and due to the recent rainy days, the water level in the canal was very high, covering the road and making the ground very slippery. The investigators speculated that the 2 children might have approached the water's edge to play and then slipped and fell into the water. Indeed, after walking along the dirt road and searching for traces near the canal, the police found many children's footprints on the embankment, one slightly larger and the other smaller. Based on the size and shape, it could be concluded that these were footprints of children aged 6 to 12. The investigators followed these footprints and walked about 1 kilometer until the footprints stopped at the edge of the water. In addition to footprints, the investigators found a bag of candy, a small pair of glasses, and a child's wristwatch. After the family of the child examined these items, they determined that the glasses and watch belonged to their child, and the candy bag was also the type of candy the 2 girls often ate. The police found mudslide marks on the slope of the canal leading down to the water's surface, as if something had slipped into the ditch, indicating that the children had encountered danger. The police immediately contacted water management authorities and blocked the water source from the upstream. After the water level receded, they began to search and found the bodies of the 2 girls under the canal. The police and forensic doctors concluded that the 2 girls slipped and fell into the canal, drowning, ruling out foul play as it was deemed an accident. It had been nearly a week since Ming Han went missing, but there were still no specific leads. The boy's family was almost desperate, feeling helpless and distressed, not knowing where their child was and whether he was safe. The police continued their investigation efforts in hopes of finding new leads soon to rescue Ming Han. There were no new developments in the case, no ransom calls, which caused great pain to Ming Han's family. They printed many missing posters and plastered them everywhere to find their child. Ming Han's mother constantly posted on social media pleading with the kidnapper, willing to sacrifice herself for her child and promising to do whatever it takes to raise ransom money if necessary. Ming Han's parents pleaded with the kidnapper not to harm their child. The heartbreaking and desperate posts of the mother quickly spread widely. Many people worried and sympathized continuously following the story of Ming Han. On Saturday, the investigative team repeatedly led search dogs throughout the village area, checking every house, every field, and vacant land areas, but still found no clues. While it seemed like the case had reached a dead end, the investigative authorities once again scrutinized the neighbors in the area where Ming Han lived. One seemingly ordinary thing caught the attention of the police: pairs of shoes placed neatly outside a house, arranged perfectly without even a half-centimeter deviation. The meticulous arrangement of shoes led the police to recall the image of a pair of shoes placed neatly outside the door when Ming Han went missing, with a stick placed evenly above them for balance. Upon entering the house, the police carefully observed everything in the room and noticed a child about 5 or 6 years old lying paralyzed on the bed. The house was clean and meticulously organized in a strange way. This family lived right next to Ming Han's house, sharing the same alley and adjacent to the boy's house. The homeowner, named Li Shuling, was a woman who had retired 9 years ago. She had devoted almost all her time to caring for her paralyzed grandson. Mrs. Ling was an educated woman who had worked for many years in an oil company in Xinjiang City. Unlike the rural women in the village, Mrs. Ling was meticulous, with every pair of shoes in the house neatly arranged, and not only shoes, but even the positions for utensils and other items in the house always adhered to strict principles. This made her difficult to approach, and neighbors rarely visited Mrs. Ling's house. On the day of the incident, Mrs. Ling's son and daughter-in-law were both working outside the village, leaving only her and her grandson at home. Suspecting the timing and arrangement of Mrs. Ling's shoes, the investigators asked for more information about her. At that moment, Ming Han's grandmother remembered an incident 2 years ago when she bathed her grandson and discovered a large bruise on his thigh the size of a ping-pong ball. She asked Ming Han, who said that Mrs. Ling, the neighbor, had pinched him. At the time, Ming Han's grandmother did not question the neighbor, but she believed that 2 years ago Ming Han, who was only 3 years old, would not lie. Ming Han's grandmother still remembered that on the day of the incident, Mrs. Ling was lingering outside the gate, but Ming Han's grandmother didn't pay much attention. Now, connecting the events, she realized that there was something wrong with this neighbor. After analyzing the situation, the special team decided to send 2 investigators to Mrs. Ling's house for a separate interview and to gather more information. Observing their attitudes, they found that Li Shuling seemed very calm, natural, and answered all the investigators' questions clearly. After the psychological examination failed, the police changed their approach and brought Li Shuling to the police station under the pretext of understanding the situation, mainly to observe any changes in her emotions. The investigators deliberately put psychological pressure on her continuously, but whether at home or at the police station, she remained very calm, answering questions very reasonably and logically, even being very cooperative in the investigation. When an innocent person is questioned repeatedly about the same thing, most people would become annoyed and frustrated. But Li Shuling's extraordinary calmness and patience in answering the same questions multiple times made the special team certain that this woman had an issue. However, Li Shuling's psyche was too strong, and there was currently no evidence to charge her. Psychological pressure on her was ineffective, so they decided to use search dogs to search the house. Although in every interview Li Shuling appeared calm, this time was different. Investigators could clearly sense that when the search dogs were brought to Li Shuling's house, she seemed unnatural, even feeling uneasy. The search dogs scoured every corner of Li Shuling's house inside and out, but found nothing. In the house, there was no place to hide a body except for the vegetable garden in front of the house. The police decided to prepare to dig up Li Shuling's vegetable garden for inspection when suddenly Li Shuling said she wanted to talk to the head of the investigative team. With only 2 people left in the interrogation room, Li Shuling confessed that she had killed Ming Han and buried him in the vegetable garden in the front yard. She pointed to a drain pipe in the tree pot that had been sealed shut and said she had stuffed the child into it and covered it with dirt. When the perpetrator who killed little Ming Han turned out to be a neighbor, the boy's family was shocked because there was no conflict between the 2 families and their relationship was very good. So why did that evil woman take the life of the lovely child in such a cruel way? Li Shuling had retired to take care of her grandson at home. Although financially stable and living comfortably, she always suffered and felt stressed because her only grandson was intellectually disabled and paralyzed due to oxygen deprivation during a difficult birth causing permanent brain damage. She said her grandson was 7 years old, but he was always sick all year round, taking expensive medicine. At night, the child would startle, twitch, and cry, preventing her from getting a good night's sleep. On the other hand, Ming Han from the neighboring house, 2 years younger than her grandson, was very healthy, chubby, cute, and hardly ever sick. The houses of Li Shuling and Ming Han were next to each other, separated by only a wall. Ming Han's grandmother had also retired, so when they had free time, the 2 would often chat. Li Shuling harbored a great jealousy because everything in the house had to be arranged her way, and she did not want others to be better than her. However, seeing her grandson lagging so far behind Ming Han made her very jealous and ashamed. She did not want others to know, so she always tried to hide the disabled child and treated him as a disgrace. This made her unable to hold her head high. Meanwhile, Ming Han from the neighboring house was very lively and mischievous. Every day when she heard Ming Han's laughter and chatter, Li Xuling felt very frustrated and resentful towards this child because he seemed to rub salt into her wound. Li Xuling said that although she was very jealous and hateful towards little Ming Han, she still tried to control herself. The reason she acted on that day to kill Ming Han was because 3 days earlier, when Ming Han came back from kindergarten and saw her sweeping the yard, the boy greeted her and stood outside the door wearing adult shoes and holding a stick, pretending to be an old man bent over all the while walking and laughing. Seeing her thin, frail, and sickly grandson all day made her extremely dissatisfied, especially when she saw Ming Han being so lovely and polite to his grandmother. She couldn't bear it. So a crazy thought appeared in her mind. Li Xuling thought that if she had to endure the suffering of having a disabled grandchild like this, she couldn't let Ming Han and his grandmother live happily like that. On July 9th, when there was no one at home, Li Xuling saw Ming Han hopping around the alley swinging a stick and singing. She immediately called Ming Han into the house. Then she locked the gate, covered the child's head with a blanket, and strangled him. Ming Han panicked and struggled, screaming for help, but the strength of a 5-year-old child was not enough to escape the hands of the evil woman driven by hatred and jealousy. After killing the child, she left the child lying next to the drain pipe in the backyard, then covered it with soil to conceal the crime. On December 29, 2015, the trial of Li Xuling was packed with even villagers standing outside the court waiting for the verdict. When the details of the case were reviewed, many present shed tears, even the judges choked up. Ultimately, Li Xuling was sentenced to death to pay for the crime she committed, and her family was ordered to compensate Ming Han's family with 20,000 yuan. This case caused immense outrage among the Chinese people. At that time, many people on social media commented that no matter how many times this woman dies, it would not compensate for the losses she caused to the victim's family. In fact, the initial cause of this case was simply jealousy and envy. At first glance, it seemed illogical, but in reality, from jealousy and envy, then later hatred. It was a gradual process of nurturing evil every day. While the hatred reached its peak, Li Xuling committed a terrible crime, depriving the life of a lovely 5-year-old child. Jealousy is defined as an extreme desire for what others possess while oneself does not have it. Most of us have experienced jealousy and cannot completely escape it. People who are jealous often pay too much attention to what others have, making them unable to focus on achieving what they need and desire. Sometimes they lack self-awareness, which leads them to deny responsibility or blame others. They think others should be responsible for what they lack, and therefore they get angry. They blame others as the trigger for their mistreated emotions and hatred, which they believe is right, making them think that others must pay for what they have done to make them feel bad. The pain and suffering they feel and experience gradually come to be seen as suffering caused by others. Their suffering and longing are gradually replaced by anger and hatred. Those who possess what they desire become their enemies, and then harmful emotions gradually invade and control themselves, leading to regrettable events for those around them and even themselves. What do you think about this case? Leave a comment below for everyone to know. If you find it helpful, don't hesitate to leave a like and subscribe to the channel to support us. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.